cloud average, highest in the east in the low 20s, cooler further west, and really quite cool across the far northwest. Still some showery rain across the far northwest as we go into next week, but generally high pressure moving in, the showers fading away, and certainly in the south, signs of things warming up.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course, it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's broadcaster Narinder Kaur and leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 4 o'clock. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. 2 Tory MPs have written to the Chief Whip calling for Chris Pincher to be removed from the party. It comes after he quit his role as Deputy Chief Whip following a drunken incident on Wednesday evening. Boris.
Is your leadership lacking? Are you drowning in sleaze? Will you suspend Chris Pincher?
Boris Johnson was quizzed on the scandal as he welcomed the New Zealand Prime Minister this afternoon. A Downing Street spokesperson says Mr Johnson believes the matter is over. Conservatives Karen Bradley and Caroline Noakes are calling for a zero-tolerance policy on sexual misconduct. Shadow Justice Minister Ellie Reeves told GB News this is just the latest in a string of incidents.
This is a Conservative government completely mired by sleaze, and it just isn't good enough. Standards in public life have got to be higher than this, and Boris Johnson has got to get a grip of it.
Secretary of State for Wales, Simon Hart, told GB News it shouldn't be used as a party political issue.
First reaction with all of this is always one of, sadness, sometimes really rather than anger, because so many people are affected by this. Clearly, massive misjudgments appear on the face of it to have been made, and I think our first priority, rather than turning this into a sort of party political discussion, which it sounded almost dangerously like it was about to be, that we look after the interests of people who've been adversely affected by this. They must be and will remain our absolute first priority.
Julian Assange has appealed against a decision to extradite him to the United States. The WikiLeaks founder is wanted by American authorities over documents leaked in 2010 and 2011 relating to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. The Home Secretary approved the extradition last month, but Assange's legal team has submitted an appeal to the High Court today. His wife, Stella, has been among those who've gathered outside the Home Office today, calling for his release from prison. GBNews understands UK authorities have plans in place for the possible return of a convicted jihadist and alleged member of the so-called Islamic State group. Ain Davis, part of the execution squad known as the Beatles, could be deported within weeks as he nears the end of his prison sentence in Turkey. Davis from West London was sentenced to 7.5 years in 2017 for terrorism offences. According to reports, Turkish officials say he's scheduled to be released on the 9th of July, but could be arrested and face criminal investigation when he returns. Russian missile strikes have killed at least 21 people, including a 12-year-old boy in a Ukrainian port city overnight. Officials say parts of residential buildings in Odessa were destroyed and nearby holiday camps were hit in the attacks. Earlier, local authorities said 41 people had been rescued from the apartment block where 152 people lived. The Kremlin has denied targeting civilians. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Moscow is still focusing its firepower on the east of the country.
The situation in Donbass remains the harshest. The fire superiority of the occupiers is still felt very much. They simply took everything from their reserves to hit us in the Luhansk region, in the Donetsk region. I'm grateful to everyone who defends our positions in such conditions. It's true heroism.
COVID infections in the UK have gone up by 32% in just 1 week. That's according to the Office for National Statistics. The latest figures show 2.3 million cases were recorded, up by more than 500,000 from the week before. It's the highest estimate since late April, and hospital admissions are also going up. UK manufacturing growth reached a 2-year low last month. The latest industry research shows it slowed between May and June, making it the lowest since the COVID pandemic. Industry leaders have blamed the slowdown on the war in Ukraine, Brexit, plus travel and supply chain disruptions. Police have warned that lives could be put at risk if protests go ahead at the British Formula One Grand Prix this weekend. Northamptonshire police say they've received credible intelligence that a group are planning to invade the track on race day. A record crowd of 142,000 people are expected at Silverstone on Sunday. Local authorities fear the event could be disrupted. Nurses and pharmacists will now be able to certify sick notes. The move is part of plans to help alleviate pressure on NHS GPs. Other health professionals, including physiotherapists, can also issue the documents, which are now called fit notes. The new changes cover England, Scotland and Wales, with Northern Ireland expected to follow suit. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now, though. Let's return to Nana Akua.
Hello, good afternoon. It is fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Bernie Ecclestone, one of the richest men on the planet, said this of his friend Vladimir Putin: "I'd rather it didn't hurt, but if it does, I'd still take a bullet. He's a first-class person, and what he's doing is something he believed was the right thing. He was doing it for Russia. Unfortunately, he's like a lot of business people, certainly like me. We make mistakes from time to time." What? A first-class person? Do you mean the man, and I use that term generously, who is allowing his troops to indiscriminately bomb women and children and is currently up for charges of war crimes at The Hague, threatening nuclear war, which will kill millions, including you, Bernie, if he doesn't get his own way, and is not allowed to continue uninterrupted with his massacre in Ukraine? Do you mean that guy? I mean, are you mad, Bernie? You're comparing this to a business mistake. Have you lost all sense of humanity and compassion? He also said that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky should have done more to avoid the war between the two countries. Well, I mean, F1 immediately put out this statement. The comments made by Bernie Ecclestone are his personal views, and in very stark contrast to the position of modern values of our sport. Yes, well, they would do. Anyone with a sense in their head would distance themselves from those comments. So here we go again. Yet another rich, self-centred sports personality making comments whilst being completely detached from the reality of a situation. Talking about Vladimir Putin as though he's a cuddly bear doing what he believes in. I doubt if he'd be saying that if he were in Ukraine. I guarantee you his friend Putin would see him as collateral damage. He wouldn't miss a heartbeat if his old mate Bernie got caught in the crossfire, or if Bernie's family was stuck in Ukraine, like, say, in the steelworks in Mariupol that was continuously bombed, despite it being clear that those inside had no hope of defending themselves, let alone escaping. They would have been incarcerated in a steel tomb had it not been for the flea bargaining of Volodymyr Zelensky. Hello? Hello, Bernie. Putin is massacring and displacing millions, initially under the guise of denazification, which we can all see is rubbish. He's the one behaving like Hitler. I mean, we've seen this before. People being killed, taken to camps, by all counts being tortured, many dying, only the strongest surviving. This is nothing short of genocide. Is it any wonder that Putin continues unobstructed, almost supported, as if he was surrounded in a framework of deluded individuals goading him on, enabling him to perpetuate this mass slaughter? Some people might argue that Bernie has the freedom of speech to say such things, even when it is clear to the majority that Putin is delusional and on a killing spree. So, should Bernie be allowed to say this? If you believe in total freedom of speech, even if it's nonsense, then I suspect your answer would be yes. I mean, we're all in support of freedom of speech, aren't we? He hasn't broken the law by saying what he said. So when does that right of freedom of speech end, if ever? Does it require morality? Freedom of speech, when do we draw the line? Right, so before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. My Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Brexit here to stay? The former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, has admitted the argument over the decision to leave the EU is now over. Finally, Tony, thank you. So Tony was a big voice of the People's Vote campaign and spent 3 years fighting to overturn the result of the democratic referendum back in 2016. So now that Tony Blair has accepted it, for my Great British Debate today, I'm asking, is Brexit here to stay? In HealthWatch, we'll be taking a look at immunotherapy. After the sad passing of Dame Deborah James this week, she raised awareness for bowel cancer and over £7 million for new cancer treatments, such as immunotherapy, which uses your own immune system to help kill cancer cells. We'll be joined by a scientist who can tell us a bit more about it and the trials that are taking place here in the UK. And after 5, it's time for Friday Focus. And today, I want to know, why is it so difficult for the doctor to get a doctor's appointment? Why can't I see my doctor? The shortage of GPs in England is set to become worse. It's predicted that more than 1 in 4 posts will be vacant within a decade. The government has promised to recruit 6,000 extra GPs in just 2 years, but ministers have admitted that they're struggling to achieve that. So we'll be exploring that in more detail later on. That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think, as ever, on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or why not tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome to my panel. Joining me today is broadcaster Nana Akua and also leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton. Right, welcome both, and welcome to my nemesis, Narinda. Hello, Narinda, nice to see you.
I know, I like you. I know you.
All right.
Well, I hope I still do at the end of this.
But we'll see what happens. We'll decide. We'll see whether you come back or not. Right. So, and welcome again. Nice to see you again, Neil.
Thank you, Nana.
Thank you very much for joining us. So I'm going to start with you, Narinda, seeing as you're new to the panel, and Neil was in as a first-timer last week. I want to know, what do you think of this now? He's come out, Bernie Ecclestone's come out with these, I would say, nonsensical comments. What is your view, first of all, of what he was saying and his right to say those things?
Well, he has got a right to say whatever he wants to say, but he's an old man, and I can just imagine his dementia, his rolling eyes as he said all of that. I think he's like, should we not just take that with a pinch of salt? What I think the important thing is, what's the difference between Putin invading Ukraine as opposed to America and Britain invading Iraq? And they also killed innocent women and children. So why is Putin being made out to be this monster and America and Britain are these heroes? It's the same thing.
No, well, I don't know whether those two are being seen as heroes. I certainly would say they are. But what do you think, Neil?
Well, I certainly agree with what we've just heard about the invasion of Iraq by Tony Blair. That was an illegal venture and proved to be a complete disaster. I was against it at the time, as I'm against all these kinds of military adventures in other people's countries. But, you know, Bernie's got great form, hasn't he? Because in 2009, he said how much he admired Hitler because he got things done. Well, he certainly did as far as the Jews of Europe.
We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that because we've actually just had some breaking news. We want to throw straight to that. A serial sex attacker who drugged and raped straight men could have assaulted many more victims who may be too embarrassed to come forward. And according to detectives, 35-year-old Luis de Silva Neto has been found guilty of drugging and assaulting 2 men at a luxury house in Oxfordshire countryside. He used the date rape drug GHB on the men in separate incidents last year before going on to rape and sexually assault them. GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White reports.
Captured on police body-worn video, the moment detectives arrest a serial sex offender.
Put your trousers on. So at this point in time, you're under arrest.
Luis de Silva Neto drugged his male victims before raping or sexually assaulting them. 2 men reported their attacks to authorities, but police fear there may be many more of his victims still out there. De Silva Neto would often look for men at night, especially those that had too much to drink. He filmed on his mobile phone as he went hunting them in public toilets. De Silva Neto drugged both his victims in separate incidents inside this exclusive cottage here in the Oxfordshire village of Middle Barton. In one incident, he picked up his victim outside a nightclub in West London before driving him 73 miles here and raping him. That victim told police he was picked up outside this nightclub in Chelsea. He'd been looking for a taxi. All he could remember was drinking a small amount of liquid inside De Silva Neto's car. Then waking up in the cottage sometime later, having been raped. In interviews in police custody, De Silva Neto insisted the interaction had been fully consensual.
I was on the King's Road. I stopped to get some cash out, and I started talking to this guy as well. And he told me that he's been to the club, blah, blah. I was like, do you want to have a drink together or whatever? He was like, yeah. He's like, I'm married, but yeah.
De Silva Neto's other victim knew his attacker when he says his trust was betrayed in the most appalling manner.
Basically, he drugged me and he used me. I don't want to go into details. I don't want to memorise it again. I don't want to relive it. For me, this is the worst experience I've ever survived or lived through. I'm heterosexual, I'm Catholic, I'm more religious, and something that I just need to digest.
Police say De Silva Neto appears to have very deliberately targeted straight men, believing perhaps that they'd be too embarrassed to report their attack.
It is entirely possible that there are other offences out there and other victims who have not as yet been identified or identified themselves to us. So what I really want to do is encourage victims to come forward and have the confidence to do that. You know, a conviction of somebody for offences like this is quite often the platform from which other people will then have that confidence and feel empowered to come forward and feel safer to do so.
Authorities believe it's likely De Silva Neto used the drug GHB. Only small amounts can render a victim unconscious. The gay serial killer Stephen Port used GHB on his 4 victims, young men who he killed with high doses of the drug, before dumping their bodies in this graveyard near his home in Barking in East London. GHB was also the weapon of choice for serial rapist Reynard Sinaga, a Manchester nurse who's believed to have raped more than 200 young men since 2005. Police say these events are thankfully very rare. Luis de Silva Neto has now been convicted for the crimes he committed. Police are appealing for anyone else who believes they may have been drugged and assaulted by him to come forward. Mark White, GB News.
You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, after the break, it'll be time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is Brexit here to stay? The former Prime Minister Tony Blair has admitted that the argument is over about the decision whether to leave the EU. He's conceded that Brexit won't be overturned for at least a generation. So, my debate this hour, I'm asking, is Brexit here to stay? Send me your thoughts as ever, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can tweet me at GBNews. I've got a poll up right now asking, is Brexit here to stay? Cast that vote now. But first, let's get some weather.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. More showers to come this weekend, but if you're after something drier, brighter and warmer, next week looks reasonably promising, certainly across the southern half of the UK. For fine weather, we need high pressure to be sitting over us, but this low pressure is taking control through the weekend. It's not going to rain all weekend. Most of us will see some sunny spells, but as this weather system moves in, bringing some fairly heavy rain this evening across Northern Ireland, spreading into parts of southern and western Scotland. Ahead of that, across the east right now, some lively showers, but they do get pushed out into the North Sea as that weather front brings rain into Wales and western parts of England by dawn. Much of eastern England having a dry night once this evening's showers clear away and temperatures holding up in double digits. On to Saturday's weather, it's a bit of a mess. We start with a line of rain across Yorkshire, down through the Midlands, southeast Wales and southwest England. That slowly trickles eastwards. Doesn't really reach East Anglia in the southeast till late in the day, so mostly dry and bright here. Behind it, some sunny spells, but there will again be showers, staying fairly cloudy across much of Scotland through the day. Temperatures, again, high teens for many, but a little warmer across the south with some sunny spells, 23, maybe 24 across the southeastern corner. There will be some showers here during Saturday evening. Elsewhere, the showers tend to fade away through the evening for England and Wales, but it will be turning fairly chilly. We keep showers going across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. And then into Sunday, again, broadly speaking, a day of sunshine and showers. The showers developing from mid-morning onwards. Not many for South Wales, southwest England. Good chance of a dry, bright day here. And elsewhere, there will be some sunny spells between those showers. And again, temperatures mostly around about average. Highest in the east in the low 20s. Cooler further west and really quite cool across the far northwest. Still some showery rain across the far northwest as we go into next week, but generally high pressure moving in, the showers fading away, and certainly in the south, signs of things warming up.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's coming up to 22 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome again to my panel today. It's broadcaster Narinder Kaur and also leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton. Now, before the break, We were talking about Bernie Ecclestone's comments. Narinda, what were you thinking about his comments? Because I know you talked about the whole thing, Iraq and all that kind of thing.
I think we're over-egging an old man's comments. I think we're just going too excited about it, forget about it. I think he said something, he's allowed to say what he wants to say, freedom of speech. Let's not put too much emphasis on it. It's actually ridiculous comments he's made. Why are we taking it so seriously?
I think we're just looking at it and thinking how offensive those are to people who are actually in.
There's a lot of things people say that are offensive, and we never put this much emphasis. Too much on one old man's opinions.
No.
Well, nothing wrong with being an old man, of course.
Yes, sorry. You're not that old. I'm so sorry.
You're not that old.
But, I mean, he's obviously made a bit of an idiot of himself in public, but then if it was against the law to make an idiot of yourself in public, then most politicians would be out of business, wouldn't they? I mean, Bernie thinks that the invasion of Ukraine was not intentional, apparently, as though there was some kind of sat-nav fault in the tank that was leading the invasion. So, clearly, he's not the brightest button, is he, as far as politics is concerned, and he should have stuck to F1 rather than making comments which basically tell everybody else to F off.
And what's your... Yeah, I like that. And in terms of freedom of speech, then, is there a line, is there a limit to where it should go? Because if we are to follow the narrative that freedom of speech is a free-for-all, where do we draw the line?
Well, I think the line should be drawn where the common law traditionally has drawn it, which is if something is an incitement to violence, or something of that
or
kind,
hate.
Or then, what is hate? You know, hate crimes are basically subjective and.
No, if it's like you said under the law, what's considered.
If it's illegal, then of course that is a firm line in the sand. But incitement to violence is the basic no-no. Otherwise, who is threatened by somebody's opinion? It's the clash of opinions. Which produces truth at the end of the day.
I like that. We'll end on that, on a clash of opinions providing truth at the end of the day. Well, let's do this then. It's now time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is Brexit here to stay? So Tony Blair has admitted that Brexit will not be overturned for at least a generation. This is what he said. However passionately I opposed Brexit, I understand we've done it. You've still got to fix the problems. This stuff in Northern Ireland is doing us damage. The fact that you've got labour shortages is doing us damage. Now, it took him long enough there, to be honest. I mean, so for my Great British Debate, I'm asking, is Brexit here to stay? I'm joined now by Keith Prince. He's the Conservative Deputy Chair of the London Assembly. Well, Keith, thank you so much for joining us. Now, it did take him a long time, didn't it? He did that lecture, didn't he? The first one he did in 2017 about the whole Brexit and how he was going to carry on and fight this thing and blah, blah, blah. Now he's finally, it's taken him 3 years after being 5 actually, slightly obstructive. I think actually last year he said something where it seemed he'd sort of turned the corner now. What's your view on all of this?
Well, can I first of all correct you? I'm no longer the Deputy Chair of the Assembly.
Well, it's not me, somebody wrote that.
That's all right.
Heads will roll, I have a word.
Indeed, as will the auto cue. But no, I think that he's come quite a long way, because if you remember at the very beginning, he said that it was far too important a decision for the British public to decide on. His view was that we shouldn't have a referendum at all because we weren't qualified to take such a decision. So he's gone from being completely arrogant to actually slowly waking up and smelling the coffee.
Well, I mean, there was one quote that he said, people voted without knowledge of the true terms of Brexit. As these terms have become clear, it is their right to change their mind. Our mission is to persuade them to do so. That's what he thought he was going to do. I mean, it's so patronising.
Well, it is. Well, I think it's patronising. He didn't think we were intelligent enough to actually make a decision. But I think the trouble with Tony Blair is that he struggles with accepting democracy. Yeah, we had a vote, it's been decided, and you can't be having these plebiscites every couple of weeks. You have to take these every one generation. You have a decision, you make it, and you make it work. And it's just a shame that there's so many people, Tony Blair being one of them, who just don't get on board and do everything they can to make it work. And if we've all worked towards making it work, and at the end of it, it hasn't worked, then at least we can say we've done the best we can.
Because actually he should admit his role as being somebody who's been very obstructive with it actually working. It's a bit like when we had the pandemic, all the different countries got together to find a vaccine, and when everyone works in unison, it's amazing what you can come up with. Within a year or so, we had a vaccine that was effective in many respects. I mean, it prevented death but didn't prevent you from catching the thing. But, you know, at least one of those things it achieved. And we've seen how if people unite, so there he is now speaking, but I wish he would just admit that actually his obstructive behaviour was one of the reasons why we're sort of in this boat, because a lot of people followed behind him and still are behind him.
Yeah, you need to just suck it up and move on, basically. We've had a lot of successes as a result of pulling out of the EU, but all people like Tony do is just talk us down all the time. There's lots and lots of positives that we can talk about, that we've done a lot better since coming out of the EU than we would have been had we still been in it.
I'm going to ask you, like what? So give me some...
Well, how about growth? We've had the fastest growth of any of the EU nations since we left. I think our growth has been around about 7% over the last 6 years. France is 6.2, Germany 5, Italy 2. So all these big countries in the EU, long way behind us when it comes to growth. I think last time I was on, we talked about COVID and the rollout of all the vaccinations. Much more effective in Britain than any other part of the EU. And in fact, had we been in the EU, they'd have probably taken some of our vaccines and held us back.
Well, they tried that anyway, didn't they?
Exactly.
They tried to take the vaccines that we'd ordered, that they hadn't ordered off the supplier, that we'd ordered them from a different supplier. I mean, it was all a bit silly, really.
Yeah.
I don't think it wasn't a good look. So do you think now that this is it then, that we will actually now accept that Brexit is actually here to stay, and this is something that people will be able to... Because he said at least for a generation. Do you think that?
Well, I think that's true. I think it's true for the UK. It's true for Scotland as well. We can't be having these referendum or referendi every couple of weeks. We've got to say, right, that's a decision of the people, and politicians actually have a moral duty to make it work, because that's the will of the people.
Thank you for that. Well, that is Keith Prince. He's the Conservative for Havering and Redbridge and a London Assembly member. Have they got it right? Excellent. They've got it right. Right, I'm also joined by Dr. Alan Wager. He's a researcher from the UK in Changing Europe. Right, so thank you so much for joining me. Is Brexit here to stay, Alan?
I think it's clear that the public agree with Tony Blair that there's no case really for having another referendum on the European Union. The interesting thing that Tony Blair said also, though, was that there was no case even for trying to rejoin the single market. So you heard Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, talking the other day about rejoining the single market, and Tony Blair, and we were talking earlier in the segment about whether one old man's opinion matters. To people like Sadiq Khan, Tony Blair's opinion matters, and Tony Blair slapped down the idea of the UK rejoining the single market. So that's a really important moment for the Labour Party and actually for the discussion about Brexit. In the next election, it won't even be about whether to rejoin the single market or anything like that. The Labour Party see Brexit. They hope you're right, and that Brexit really is finished and done as a debate.
Do you believe them? Do you believe them? Do you think because they could be priming us to get themselves ready for potentially winning the election, because they know, and we know, that if, for example, the Conservative Party don't get themselves together, they can't stop the infighting and don't stop all the nonsense that they're putting us through and don't fix the economy or don't get anywhere near it, they know that they've probably lost all their votes, and therefore Labour Party and potentially the Liberal Democrats, there's a talk of a Lib-Lab pact, which would mean that then they would be governing. So they are priming us. Do you think that's the case?
I think there's potentially something in the idea that the strategy is over time, incrementally, to move ever closer towards the European Union. That might be short of single market membership in the next electoral cycle, but remember, the decision to enter the European Union, the European project, if you like, 4 decades, in 1974-5 took decades to reverse. So this idea that it won't happen in a generation, I think we've known that since the decisive general election of December 2019, that there's going to be no chance anytime soon of reversing the result. But I think there is the prospect among people like Tony Blair that over time, over say a decade or 2 decades, we could be in a position where you can get so close to the European Union that you become, in effect, a rule taker, and then the argument may go, well, we may as well be in. So that's potentially the strategy that underpins the sort of long game for pro-Europeans in the UK. It would have to be a long game because, as I say, while a lot of the public think maybe there has been some economic damage, it looks like even a lot of Leavers maybe accept there's been a bit of an economic hit. There's no real demand to rerun a referendum in any sort of form like that.
I think we all knew that there'd be some sort of initial economic damage. I don't think anyone would deny that we expected that. Can I ask then, why do you think, very briefly, why people like Tony Blair, who wanted to remain in the EU, don't seem to be able to accept the decision? Even though he says he has, finally, there's still people clinging on.
Well, I think people felt very, very strongly about staying in the European Union. Tony Blair is an arch pragmatist as a politician, yet he took the decision to the very, very last moment, even when it looked like it was a hopeless project, and all the way through to the general election of 2019, when it looked like it was going to, really, really suffer at the hands of Boris Johnson and that Get Brexit Done message. He continued to argue for that second referendum, because clearly he saw it as this sort of once in a generation, if you like, issue, and that's why it's really important that he's saying for a generation it's a done deal, and it's going to take decades to reverse. I think that's really important, because actually it shows that for these sort of pro-Remain campaigners, pro-Remain MPs, it's going to be a really, really long project to get back in. But it does also...
Let's hope, Alan, that he doesn't do a Nicola Sturgeon. Dr. Alan Wager, thank you very much. He's a researcher at the UK in a Changing Europe. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, after the break, we will continue with our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, is Brexit here to stay? Now, you'll hear the thoughts of my panel. And today, it's broadcaster Narinder Kaur and also leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton. And don't forget, at 5, it will be time for Friday Focus. And today, I want to get to the bottom of why I can't see my doctor. We're being warned that the shortage of GPs is going to get worse. And in 10 years, it's predicted that 1 in 4 doctors' posts will be vacant. This comes at a time where 6,000 GPs are meant to be recruited in the next few years. Stay with me, all that on the way. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. It's 4:33. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Sex offender Luis da Silva Neto has been found guilty of spiking 2 men with drugs before raping one and sexually assaulting the other. He drugged the men with GHB, a so-called aphrodisiac drug, in separate incidents last November and December in Middle Barton in Oxfordshire. Da Silva Neto from London will be sentenced next Thursday. 2 Tory MPs have written to the Chief Whip calling for Chris Pincher to be removed from the party. It comes after he quit his role as Deputy Chief Whip following a drunken incident on Wednesday evening.
Is your leadership lacking? Are you drowning in sleaze? Will you suspend Chris Pincher?
Boris Johnson was quizzed on the scandal as he welcomed the New Zealand Prime Minister to Downing Street. A Number 10 spokesperson says Mr Johnson believes the matter is now over. However, Karen Bradley and Caroline Noakes, the only 2 Conservative female chairs of select committees, are calling for a zero-tolerance policy on sexual misconduct. GB News understands UK authorities have plans in place for the possible return of a convicted jihadist and alleged member of the so-called Islamic State group. According to reports, Turkish officials say Ain Davis from West London could be deported within weeks. He was jailed in 2017 for terrorism offences and was a member of the execution squad known as the Beatles. And police have warned that lives could be put at risk if protests go ahead at the British Formula 1 Grand Prix this weekend. Northamptonshire police say they've received credible intelligence that a group is planning to invade the track on race day. A record crowd of 142,000 are expected at Silverstone on Sunday. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere, Nana Akua will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
So welcome back. It's coming up to 38 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now let's get back to our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is Brexit here to stay? Now, back in 2016, the UK voted to leave the EU by 52% to 48%. A load of people couldn't accept the result and still haven't. This is why they've been labelled Remoaners. And now the former Prime Minister, Sir Tony Blair, has said that Brexit won't be overturned for at least a generation. So finally, he's coming to terms with a democratic vote. But we've still got to fix the trouble with Northern Ireland, the protocol still, and address the labour shortages that exist. So for my Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Brexit here to stay? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster Narinder Kaur and leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton. Right, Narinder, I'm going to start with you. Is it here to stay?
I think the question isn't, is it here to stay? Of course it's here to stay. We all accepted that.
Really?
Yeah. Well, no, of course, I'd love another referendum. It's not going to happen.
Well, it does.
The question is, and I can't believe this should be the question, has it worked? No, it hasn't. It's failed miserably.
But how can you say it's failed? It's been... He's only just accepted it, right? And it happened in 2016. We've had
We're
COVID.
in 2022 now.
We've had COVID, because remember there was infighting about whether it should happen or not, so that took them a few years to finally do it. Then eventually we got somebody who was a proper Brexiteer who accepted, and he managed to bring everybody with him to get the whole withdrawal agreement accepted. I think that was 2019. So we're still not quite there.
Now, that sounds like excuses to me.
No, because we had to get the withdrawal agreement together before we could even start.
And that took long enough.
Remember, there was
all
a 2-year...
Yeah,
that was. And the reason it was obstructed was because of a lot of obstructive politicians who couldn't accept the result. People like Tony Blair. Neil?
Yeah, well, I totally agree. Mind you, Tony Blair's as straight as a corkscrew, as we know, so I wouldn't take at face value anything that he says. And very often the words that come out of his... No, I'm not here to defend Boris either, but, Blair is, and has been shown to be throughout his political life, ready to be a serial liar in so many...
Oh, my God, and Boris Johnson is the biggest liar.
I tell you, I'm not here to defend Boris Johnson. We're talking about Tony Blair. But the problem with Brexit is, so far, virtually nothing has been done to take advantage of the freedoms that we've now got as a result of legally being out of the EU. For example, the 5% VAT on domestic fuel and so on. We could have removed that, but we haven't done. Why not? So the problem, I think, is not so much that Brexit might be reversed, but that Brexit might be undermined by not taking advantage of the opportunities that we've had for the last 6 years. I mean, last week was the 6th anniversary of that referendum result, and we've done absolutely nothing to become effectively the independent sovereign nation that the people voted to become in the referendum 6 years ago.
I think you'll find that we won't. I think we'll just become weaker. I think people thought, we'll become Great Britain and the pound will be strong and we'll become richer and businesses are failing.
Why are you so pessimistic about the power of the British people to run their own lives according to what they want rather than some unelected bureaucrats based in Brussels who you can't even name?
Well, actually, because Keith made a good point, he said that Tony Blair was arrogant, thinking the British public weren't intelligent enough. Some of them should have taken an IQ test, actually, because when they voted for the most stupid things, because they thought voting for Brexit meant we'd get chickens from Britain and the chickens wouldn't come from that. That's dumb.
Well, the logic
People
of your
like that were voting.
The logic of your position is that you'd ban general elections then. Because the same people vote in the general election.
Well, which referendum counts then? The one in 1974, this one? Which one was more important?
Well, it's 1975.
OK.
But
which one counts then? Which one actually counts?
Well, they both counted.
Right.
But you can't preclude the possibility that there might in due course be a referendum to rejoin the EU. I bet you a pound to a penny that we won't be in that position. But in a generation's time, if the debate is reignited, of course, we could have another referendum. But I think...
Don't you think it's quite patronising to say that people didn't kind of know what they're voting for?
Oh, I don't think they did, because remember the buzz that your own party had.
But again, the question is, though, don't you think it's pretty patronising to say that? Because if I said to you, well, you didn't know what you were voting for, would you be happy with that comment? Because I'm listening, and I've got to be honest, I did vote to leave because I had various reasons.
Oh, my gosh!
I voted to leave, and I'll tell you why. Should I tell you why?
Yes.
Why do you think I voted to leave? Because you seem to be knowing what people...
I don't know why you voted to leave.
OK, well, I'll tell you why I voted to leave. And you talked about the sterling being high. I voted to leave to bring down the value of sterling a little bit because people would be coming to this country to work, to take advantage... But
they're not.
Hang on, let me finish. I said they were coming to this country to take advantage of the high value of sterling, but then they'd send the money back to wherever it was they'd come from the EU. In coming to the UK and having open borders, it simply meant that it brought down the wage for the indigenous population who could not really afford to work at the low wages that they were being paid because they had competition from such an influx of labour from the EU.
That hasn't solved.
No, it has actually, because the reason... So now, in order to get people for this country to do the jobs, they're going to have to increase the wages, and they're going to have to source from this indigenous population, and then we can specifically...
Still won't work. They'll still be signing on.
And then we can And then we can specifically recruit people for the jobs where we need them from all over the world, not just from the EU. Which, let me tell you, actually...
But you're not getting people from all over the world. We've got no doctors. They can't come in from India. We're not getting people from all over the world.
And
you're going to have to pay British people. But they're still not coming through. But British people will only get up off their arses if... Can I say that?
Apologise for that word, by the way.
Sorry.
But
they'll only get up off their bums that if they get paid more. Whereas if we had other workers coming in, we were getting all the work. The economy was thriving. The economy is on its knees.
Yes, but it's only big business that was thriving. So big companies that could afford to pay... Big businesses that could afford to pay tiny amounts of money but get lots of value for their money were able to exploit that situation, and that's not acceptable, because people who are living in places like Newcastle, up north, from where we're both from, and all over this country, especially outside the London bubble, was suffering because of this low wage.
They're still suffering. Oh my goodness!
Yes,
but
at least
they're suffering.
Well, the Red Wall is continuing to vote.
This government has not got immigration under control, even though we're out of the EU. I mean, 880,000 people were accepted for settlement in the United Kingdom last year, nearly 1 million people. We've added 6.5 million people to our population in the last 20 years. That's why
it was all down to immigration.
That's why we're having to concrete over huge swathes of the countryside to provide the houses for people to live in. But you're absolutely right that wage levels are depressed in this country because of this immigration. And if we've got immigration really under control, that would raise the wage level, particularly for the people who are in what are normally regarded as menial, low-paid jobs. And that's one of the biggest drivers of poverty in this country, is that people aren't paid enough to have a decent wage.
Migrants were prepared to do those jobs. My father came over to this country in the 60s, and he did those jobs that the British people wouldn't do. My father did those jobs. He worked in the steel foundries, you know, and we built up our businesses. But my father and my uncles, they did the jobs that British people wouldn't do.
But was it unvetted immigration from the EU, or were they vetted before they came here?
Vetted.
Exactly. That's the point. They were vetted, not just open
But the Ukrainians are allowed in, or give them a visa in 1 week.
But that's because there's a war.
There was a war in Syria, in Afghan as well,
but we're not
and they weren't given anything. No, because what we are talking about is the jobs, the NHS, the this, the that, and actually the Ukrainians are just given a free pass, not even getting checked. Who said they're not criminals? Who said they're not going to take over the school?
Well, actually,
my son, 16 years of education, 16 years of education, never once came home saying, oh, 4 new Syrians have joined our school. Just a month ago, 10 new Ukrainians have joined our school. Who said they're not going to take up the hospital time, the jobs, and this, that?
There's a difference between...
Why? The difference is white and brown.
No, it's not. I don't think so.
It's all to do with colour.
No, it's not.
The difference is asylum and refugee status compared with just mainstream immigration. And we have immigration control, theoretically, as does every country in the world. But in practice, we can't cope with the flows of people who want to come here. So, you're talking Britain down as being a kind of basket case. Why do so many people want to come to Britain? It's because it's such a great place, because we have such a vibrant, thriving economy, and because it's a gateway to so much else in the world.
And actually, just to dismiss the white and brown argument, remember most people coming from the EU are white. Just remember that, so it's not a white and brown argument, because the doors are open to white people, and we've actually closed the borders and changed it for the people coming.
So we've got a less racist.
And actually, it opens the borders to people from Africa and India and places of where people of colour are from. Right, let's see what's happening, because this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice, your opportunity to tell us what you think about the topics that we're discussing. Let's have a chat to Alan McNeely. Where should we go? Let's go to Grimsby. Let's see. Let's have a chat with Alan. Alan, a new voice on the programme. Alan, what do you think? Hi, what are your thoughts on what we're discussing?
It's interesting to see that the arguments still rumble on. Brexit's only just begun. The idea that we were going to leave on one day and everything was going to change the following day is complete nonsense. Johnson negotiated Brexit despite the fact that many people said this would be impossible. It's not the best deal, but it is the beginning of the future. And the sooner people get behind it, then the better for everybody.
Well, I'm noticing a lovely twang in your voice. I'm thinking that is a Northern Ireland accent. I'm not very good at it. So what are your thoughts on the protocol? Because that's a bit of a sticky wicket there.
Well, the protocol, in theory, could have worked if the EU had implemented it in a fair and reasonable way, but it's clearly that they've no intention of doing that. So I'm pleased to see that the government have finally taken some steps to fix that situation, because it cannot be right for anybody to have a barrier to trade within the UK. So the sooner that gets out of the way, the better.
Brilliant. So Brexit is not for turning, in your view? Yes or no? It's not for turning.
Absolutely not, but it doesn't mean to say that it's all done and dusted. It'll take a long time to divorce ourselves after 47 years of marriage to the EU, so it's not going to be done overnight. But that doesn't mean to say that we don't have a bright and a good future ahead for the country. That would be my opinion. It would be nice to see the people who are always running the country down and bemoaning the fact that we've left the EU actually get behind it and make it work and work well, because there is opportunity for everybody in the future.
Absolutely, Alan. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much. That's Alan McNeely. His debut as a great British voice. Excellent. Right, so today I'm asking, is Brexit here to stay? And lots of you are beginning in touch with your views. Let's see what Matt says. Matt says, yes, we haven't suffered enough yet. Sean says, of course it is. The matter is settled now. Arthur says it's done. We should never join the EU anymore. We just need to secure our borders even tighter now. Alan says, I certainly hope so. Narinda's gone, Alan says, I certainly hope so. Brexit is over. Remainers need to get over it. Anthony says, of course, Brexit is here to stay. It was our democratic wish. Anyone that wishes to reverse it is an enemy of democratic rights. And Ad says, to be fair, a lot of Brexiteers are still crying about it, which is hilarious. Really? I'm not crying. Are you crying?
No.
I'm not crying. I'm not crying.
There are a lot of people with Brexit derangement syndrome, aren't there, where they can't get over it.
They can't get over it. They can't get over it. Michael says, no, there are those out there who will do anything outside the boundaries of democracy to drag us back in. Right, let's have a look at the poll, because there's one up right now on Twitter throughout the show asking, is Brexit here to stay? And currently, 92% of you say yes. Only 8% of you say no. Well, if you just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. Now still to come, it's our health breakthrough this hour. It is, of course, HealthWatch. And today we're looking at immunotherapy. After the sad news that cancer campaigner Dame Deborah James died at 40 years old this week, we're going to have a look at some of the groundbreaking research taking place here in the UK to kill cancer cells. But first, let's have a break.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. And now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's just coming up to 54 minutes after 4 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. You can also catch us on YouTube or download our app to catch all the programmes here on the channel. Now, though, it is time for HealthWatch, and we're looking at treatments for bowel cancer. Now, in the last few weeks of her life, cancer patient and campaigner Dame Deborah James raised more than £7 million into new cancer treatments. Now, she was passionate about one area of cancer research in particular, and that is personalised medicine. And one type of personalised medicine is immunotherapy. Right, I'm joined now by Dr. Kai Keen Xu. He is a consultant and medical oncologist. Right, so welcome to the programme. Now, first of all, immunotherapy, we hear it a lot. What is it?
Well, Nana, thank you very much for inviting me on the programme and for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about, yes, immunotherapy. So I'm sure a lot of people have been hearing about this, and the way I would explain to my patients is this. If we think about it, you know, when we use our own immune system to kill bacteria and viruses, okay, it is because those bacteria and viruses are foreign to our body. They express foreign proteins, which then our immune system recognizes as foreign. We boost up our white cells, something called our T cells, and then they go in and they kill the bacteria and the viruses. And the immune system is very clever because it's usually adaptive and it has memory. That's why people, you know, sometimes they get over a cold, they get over bacteria, and it doesn't come back again. So if we now think about cancer cells, they are very foreign to the body as well, aren't they? They shouldn't be there. And cancer is essentially a genetic disease. And so what happens is when you have lots of genetic alterations, those cancer cells will express these foreign proteins. And we have found it hard, but we now have got drugs called checkpoint inhibitors to boost up your immune system to recognize these cancer cells as foreign, like bacterial viruses. And then they stimulate your immune system then to recognize them foreign and then kill them, okay? So it's a very interesting concept because most of the drugs are directly trying to kill the cancer cells by the drug acting on the cancer cell. This time, we're using almost a living process, our own immune system, to kill it. And that's why we're getting, in some patients, and this is where the personalized bit, not all, we get this amazing response where not only does it shrink the cancer down, it could even melt them away, okay? And they're durable. That means it can last for many years. Okay, so it can last for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, even longer, even patients with advanced disease. Is that kind of a good explanation for you?
So what if you've got, because from what you've heard, what I've listened to, what if you've got an autoimmune condition, so something where your immune system, because I thought cancer in a sense was that, what if you've got a hyperactive immune system and you use this, can this therapy work for you? Because if you've got a hyperactive immune system that is ultimately attacking your own cells and you have a cancer, then if you then boost the immune system, wouldn't it work in a counterproductive manner?
So that's excellent. So in fact, the other way to say is that, of course, if you've already got an autoimmune disorder, those are benign disorders, which we all know about: asthma, rheumatoid arthritis, people with inflammatory bowel disease, autoimmune thyroid problems. So those are where your natural immune system, for some reason, is overactivated, is attacking your normal cells. So on one hand, okay, of course, we do not want patients when they are on immunotherapy, they could actually get these autoimmune effects. So you can get autoimmune thyroid disorders. Having said that, you can suppress, when we treat rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, we give steroids, right, to suppress the immune system. So on one hand, it's, yes, basically you don't want to cause those autoimmune problems, but when you already have an autoimmune thyroid problem, it doesn't stop you from benefiting from immunotherapy, but there's a difficult balance then of trying to keep your benign condition under control. But of course, at the end of cancer is such a serious condition, most patients would say, can you not work out a concoction for me so I can benefit from immunotherapy without impacting my other conditions? And we can do that, by the way. It is totally possible. So patients who have been told by the doctors you can't have it because you've got some autoimmune condition, that is not true.
Interesting. And what about the other thing that I hear about cancer cells is that they hide, so your immune system won't see them. So does the immunotherapy technique expose so that your immune system can see the cancer and attack it?
Exactly. So the way I explain it again to the patients is that cells aren't sentient, but they usually express proteins to suppress your immune system. Okay, so the idea is that when you activate your immune system, you're trying to kill your bacteria and viruses, and then immediately there are these what we call checkpoints, okay, that stop your immune system going from overdrive. Okay, so that means that if you do get the overdrive, you get into trouble, right? So the idea is that in some cancers, they are actually trying to do that. They are saying they're cloaking themselves because they are suppressing the activation of your immune system. So what we do is we use these antibodies, okay, to block those overactive signals. So it kind of uncloaks the cancer cell. So your normal, like a normal immune system can then recognize it. It says uncloaking, and off we go. Now you're uncloaked. Now we can attack them.
This sounds fascinating, and I'm so excited that this sort of treatment is hopefully going to be commonplace and the thing that will be used widely. Thank you so much for talking to us. That's Dr. Kai-Keen Shu. He's a consultant medical oncologist. You're watching me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. Well, it's just coming up to 5 o'clock. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. We'll be talking about lots of big topics that are hitting the headlines right now alongside my panel. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. It's just gone 5 o'clock. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. A sex offender has been found guilty of spiking two men with drugs before raping one and sexually assaulting the other. Luis da Silva Neto drugged the men with GHB, a so-called aphrodisiac drug, in separate incidents last November and December in Middle Barton in Oxfordshire. The court heard both victims woke up naked and unaware of what had happened to them. Da Silva Neto from London will be sentenced next Thursday. Downing Street says Boris Johnson had no reason to block Chris Pincher being appointed as Deputy Chief Whip, despite appearing to be aware of concerns about him.
Is your leadership lacking? Are you drowning in sleaze? Will you suspend Chris Pincher?
Two Tory MPs have written to the Chief Whip calling for Chris Pincher to be removed from the Conservative Party. He resigned from his role after a drunken incident on Wednesday evening. Downing Street has said the Prime Minister believes the matter is over. Conservatives Karen Bradley and Caroline Noakes are calling for a zero-tolerance policy on sexual misconduct. Shadow Justice Minister Ellie Reeves told GB News this is just the latest in a string of incidents.
This is a Conservative government completely mired by sleaze, and it just isn't good enough. Standards in public life have got to be higher than this, and Boris Johnson has got to get a grip of it.
Wales Secretary Simon Hart told GB News it shouldn't be used as a party political issue.
First reaction with all of this is always one of sadness, sometimes really rather than anger, because so many people are affected by this. Clearly, massive misjudgments appear on the face of it to have been made, and I think our first priority, rather than turning this into a sort of party political discussion, which it sounded almost dangerously like it was about to be, that we look after the interests of people who've been adversely affected by this. They must be and will remain our absolute first priority.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has appealed against a decision to extradite him to the United States. He's wanted by American authorities over documents leaked in 2010 and 2011 linked to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, approved his extradition last month. His wife Stella was among those staging a protest outside the Home Office today, calling for his release. GB News understands UK authorities have plans in place for the possible return of a convicted jihadist and alleged member of the so-called Islamic State group. Ain Davis, part of the execution squad known as the Beatles, could be deported within weeks as he nears the end of his prison sentence in Turkey. Davis from West London was sentenced to 7.5 years in 2017 for terrorism offences. According to reports, Turkish officials say he's scheduled to be released on the 9th of July but could be arrested and face criminal investigation when he returns. Russian missile strikes have killed at least 21 people, including a 12-year-old boy, in a Ukrainian port city overnight. Officials say parts of residential buildings in Odessa were destroyed and nearby holiday camps were hit in the attacks. Earlier, local authorities said 41 people had been rescued from the apartment block where 152 people lived. The Kremlin has denied targeting civilians. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Moscow is still focusing its firepower on the east of the country.
The situation in Donbass remains the harshest. The fire superiority of the occupiers is still felt very much. They simply took everything from their reserves to hit us in the Luhansk region, in the Donetsk region. I'm grateful to everyone who defends our positions in such conditions. It's true heroism.
UK manufacturing growth reached a 2-year low last month. The latest industry research shows it slowed between May and June, making it the lowest since the COVID pandemic. Industry leaders have blamed the slowdown on the war in Ukraine, on Brexit, plus travel and supply chain disruptions. Police have warned that lives could be put at risk if protests go ahead at the British Formula One Grand Prix this weekend. Northamptonshire police say they've received credible intelligence that a group are planning to invade the track on race day. A record crowd of 142,000 are expected at Silverstone on Sunday. Local authorities fear the event could be disrupted. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. It's back to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. It is fast approaching 5 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster Narinder Kaur and also leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton. Now, still to come in today's Friday Focus, I'm asking why can't I see my doctor? The shortage of GPs in England is set to become worse, with the number of empty positions set to rise throughout the next decade. And the government have promised to recruit 6,000 extra GPs in the space of just 2 years. But ministers have admitted that they're struggling to achieve that target. So in a moment, I'll be speaking to 2 GPs about how we can plug the shortage in doctors. And in the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should business delve into gender? Halifax has been accused of alienating its customers after its social media posts on gender pronouns. The bank recently announced that it would be allowing employees to present their preferred gender pronoun on name badges and told critical customers that if they didn't like it, they could close their accounts. 150 Halifax customers replied to the tweet from the bank saying that they would take their customer elsewhere. I want to ask whether it's really the place of business to get involved and the gender debate. You can always get in touch. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or send me that tweet at gbnews. So the shortage of GPs, it's obviously now time for Friday Focus. Now in England, that could be actually getting worse. It's set to become that way as a new study predicts that 1 in 4 posts could be vacant by the end of the decade. Now, according to the study by the Health Foundation, the shortfall could rise to over 10,000 by the end of the decade. And at present, the number of doctors entering the profession is on the rise. But the study found that this will be offset by GPs retiring or moving towards part-time work. So it leaves the government with a question of how it will ensure that surgeries are properly staffed over the next 10 years. So I'm joined now by Rennie Hound-Hundekamp, who's a practising NHS GP. So Rennie, thank you so much for joining me. First of all,
Hi, Nana.
Look, we've got the same number of people and patients, right? So why is there such a shortage of doctors? Are they disappearing? People can't get appointments. It seems to have happened so suddenly. What exactly is going on?
So I don't think it has happened suddenly, actually, Nana. You know, I've been very critical of GPs for not seeing patients face-to-face and for not opening up appointments in COVID. But on this occasion, I think this is successive government's fault. If you think that for the last 30 years, we have halved the number of hospital beds, and yet the population in the UK has grown by 20%. So what that does is it actually switches so much work that would have been done in hospital onto GPs. All that's happened in the last couple of years is that that's been exacerbated by COVID, because whilst people think GPs weren't working, they were. Some of them were seeing patients face-to-face, like me, but some weren't. But what was happening was hospitals didn't see patients face-to-face. So in all of those specialities where they see patients all of the time and they manage them by doing scans and bloods, they were seeing them by Zoom or by telephone, and then they were sending an email or a letter through to the GP saying, we've had contact with this patient today, would you now please do their bloods? Would you change their medications? Once you get the bloods, would you do the scan? So suddenly there was a massive transfer of work during COVID from hospitals to GPs. So that just made an already bad situation in terms of work even worse. And GPs have been snowed under by this kind of work. I can promise you, I see it every day when I'm in practice. And there's a combination of then other things coming in from the sides, because it's complex, where the government have failed to publish any serious workforce planning. And by that, I mean looking at 10 and 20 years ahead, how much the population will grow, how many doctors you need for that, how many doctors are going to retire, how many of those doctors will be women who want to work part-time because they have families. That's all part of good workforce planning, and it's never been done. The cap on doctors has remained in place because it's expensive to train a doctor. It's been lifted slightly in COVID just because so many students got their A-level grades because of the way that they were marked, but they had to lift it so that they all got their university places with their grades. But there's no indication that that will last. And as you rightly say, GP training places have been opened up. And whilst if you count GPs that are in training, so not qualified to see people on their own, there's been about an increase over the last few years of 700 GPs. But in actuality, if you take out those training doctors, there's been a decrease of over 2,000. And that's because of the workload pressures, retiring doctors, a pension cap, and people might say that's greedy, but when your pension has reached its cap, mine hasn't, but when it has, and you suddenly find that you work and actually pay more in tax than you earn for the session, you're not going to do it, Nana. You're not. So they could lift that. And when you have these workforce pressures on top of all that, so many GPs are just saying, no, I can't do it anymore. I'm just burnt out. I need to leave.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, look, what would you say to this then? Because the Department of Health and Social Care spokeswoman said that the government had invested in GPs with record numbers now in training. That's what they're saying. Are you not seeing that? Because it sounds like there are a lot of people in training now to become doctors and GPs and things.
700 extra GPs, Nana, that's what it actually equates to. I looked at it today, 762. Yeah. But when you think about it, a few years ago, Jeremy Hunt committed to supplying 5,000 extra GPs. They will not meet that or anywhere near. They're not even going to get to 1,000. So the Department of Health may say that, but it's not true and it's not happening.
So what about then? I mean, because obviously we've got Brexit now and everything else like that, and we can recruit doctors. Usually, actually, most doctors probably come from outside the EU, as I understand it. A lot of nurses from in the EU, but a lot of outside the EU as well. Do we need to recruit outside and try and get more people in? Would you suggest that as well?
So I think as an interim and immediate answer, then yes, that might be the answer, because you're not going to magic GPs up overnight. Bear in mind, it takes 10 years to train a GP from start to finish, once they've been through training, foundation years, and then GP training. So you're not going to increase this number overnight, which is why workforce planning is so important and just hasn't happened. And obviously, it's a political hot potato, because when it extends over a government's 5-year tenure, they become less interested in it because it's not immediate. So we need to increase the number of GPs in training. And by that, I don't just mean GPs, I mean doctors, because there are 100,000 vacancies across the NHS. You know, it's all very well doing someone else's work for a day, but when you do it for 6 months, you just can't. It becomes soul destroying. I had a piece in the Mail this week about this, and actually, doctors are just burnt out. Now, I'm not saying that they should work harder, because they're working really, really hard. And the NHS is reliant on doctors, both in secondary care and primary care, going over and above what they're paid to do. If they didn't do that, the NHS would collapse tomorrow. It might be close, but if they worked to actually what they were paid for, it would collapse tomorrow.
Well, some people think a lot of a lot of staff at the NHS are actually paid quite well. I mean, do you think they deserve a pay rise then? Another one?
So I personally think we are paid quite well, and I wouldn't argue or strike for a pay rise right now. I think we're in a cost of living crisis. We need to understand that whilst we work really, really hard, we're still well paid. I feel well paid. I don't want a pay rise. And I think GPs, along with everyone else, has to be realistic. You know, that is not the way to fix the NHS at the moment. The way to fix the NHS is for us to address these workforce issues and get more doctors in, not to suddenly demand a 30% pay rise.
Well, listen, Rennie, it's good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your view. That's Rennie Hunderkamp. She is an NHS GP. Really good to talk to you. Thank you for your thoughts. Right, let's have a chat with Lawrence Buckman. He's the former chairman of the British Medical Association GPs Committee. Lawrence, thank you so much for taking part in the programme. Now, I want to know, with regard to the shortage in GPs, is it a problem that we're going to be seeing, the government could have actually seen coming?
I gave my first speech about this in 2000, and many were speaking well before me about the same thing. And it's been obvious for ages that we were not recruiting, training and retaining enough GPs. Obvious. The government of the day scrapped workforce controls around 2000, and since then there's been no central planning. So when somebody says, oh, we're going to have 6,000 more, whatever, 6,000 more GPs, they might well train a few more, but those people are not going to work the 9-session general practice that I used to do. And most GPs now don't work 9 sessions a week. They've chosen to work less. They get paid less, of course, but that's the way they've chosen to work. And that means that however many there are, you've got to look at whole-time equivalents. How many full-time GPs are you recruiting? And the 700 that you've just been talking about actually equates to far less, probably around 200 actual whole-time equivalents. We are never going to achieve 6,000. It was obvious this was coming many years ago. We didn't recruit enough. Brexit hasn't made a huge difference, but it's certainly made it slightly worse, because there were doctors from the EU coming here in quite large numbers. Now, of course, they don't come. And the number of people coming from the African and Indian subcontinents, they, of course, we don't want to take them away from the countries that need them. We want to grow our own. We shouldn't be stealing somebody else's doctors. And actually, they're trained to work in their own countries. We don't really want them coming here. We want our own doctors coming here. And as has been said, it's 10 years to cook a GP. And you can't just do that overnight. So we have to have solutions now. First, we have to stop pretending we're going to get another 6,000, because we're not. The latest independent report published 2 days ago showed that, in fact, we're going to be about 10,000 short within a couple of years. And I've no doubt those figures are correct. And so what we need to do is work out now how we can cope with what's going on now. It's all very well having a dream of 10,000 more in 10 years, it could be. But I think we have to start thinking of something now for the population who are here today, not saying, oh, well, in so many years' time, there'll be lots more, because those lots more will not translate into whole-time equivalents.
Well, of course, it was Tony Blair's government that were in charge in 2000, around about that time. So it's successive, although they all blame each other, it's all of them. The whole mismanagement comes down to all of them. Why do you think that the government hasn't taken action sooner, though? Because it seems, as this is an obvious thing that you've pointed out quite a while ago, what is that? Why have they not done anything? Because obviously, for you and I watching now, and those who are at home looking to try and get a GP, all these solutions that will come later on in time don't help them at all.
Right. Politicians work to a 5-year agenda, and part of that agenda is making things look good. And it's much more interesting seeing a politician cut a ribbon to a hospital or open a new scanning machine or something like that than it is general practice. General practice is a remarkably unglamorous location. Now, of course, we're saying, well, we need lots of GPs, and they aren't there for reasons you've already heard. So what we have to do is persuade politicians that they've got to get a grip of the workforce agenda, and it's got to be across the piece, not just GPs. The whole of the NHS is struggling with workforce shortages. What we have to do is start planning for the future, but we need to take decisions today to do that in the longer term. And in the shorter term, we have to come up with some better solutions for how we deal with things next week.
We need a more long-term strategy, don't we? Because this is just going to continue and run. I presume for those who are waiting for their appointments, we'll just keep plugging away. Dr. Lawrence Buckman, thank you so much for joining me. He's the former chairman of the BMA and GPs Committee. This is GB News. We are live. Coming up in the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should businesses delve into the gender debate? Now, Halifax has caused controversy after telling customers who disagreed with its gender pronoun badge policy that they could close their accounts. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I want to ask, should businesses delve into the gender debate? We'll discuss that in the next hour, but first, let's get an update with your weather.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. More showers to come this weekend, but if you're after something drier, brighter and warmer, next week looks reasonably promising, certainly across the southern half of the UK. For fine weather, we need high pressure to be sitting over us, but this low pressure is taking control through the weekend. It's not going to rain all weekend. Most of us will see some sunny spells, but as this weather system moves in, bringing some fairly heavy rain this evening across Northern Ireland, spreading into parts of southern and western Scotland. Ahead of that, across the east right now, some lively showers, but they do get pushed out into the North Sea as that weather front brings rain into Wales and western parts of England by dawn. Much of eastern England having a dry night once this evening's showers clear away and temperatures holding up in double digits. On to Saturday's weather, it's a bit of a mess. We start with a line of rain across Yorkshire, down through the Midlands, southeast Wales and southwest England. That slowly trickles eastwards. Doesn't really reach East Anglia in the southeast till late in the day, so mostly dry and bright here. Behind it, some sunny spells, but there will again be showers, staying fairly cloudy across much of Scotland through the day. Temperatures, again, high teens for many, but a little warmer across the south with some sunny spells, 23, maybe 24 across the southeastern corner. There will be some showers here during Saturday evening. Elsewhere, the showers tend to fade away through the evening for England and Wales, but it will be turning fairly chilly. We keep showers going across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. And then into Sunday, again, broadly speaking, a day of sunshine and showers. The showers developing from mid-morning onwards. Not many for South Wales, southwest England. Good chance of a dry, bright day here. And elsewhere, there will be some sunny spells between those showers. And again, temperatures mostly around about average. Highest in the east in the low 20s. Cooler further west and really quite cool across the far northwest. Still some showery rain across the far northwest as we go into next week, but generally high pressure moving in, the showers fading away, and certainly in the south, signs of things warming up.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
So it's coming up to 23 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should businesses delve into the gender debate? Now, Halifax has been criticised for its treatment of customers who disagree with its new gender pronoun policy. The bank announced that it would allow employees to display their preferred pronouns on their name badges. Now, that was something that was announced this week, but when some customers on Twitter criticised it, Halifax said that customers who were critical of the policy could take their custom elsewhere. 150 account users have now tweeted saying that they will be moving to other banks, and it was to ask, I want to ask, if it is right for the companies to get involved in the debate in the first instance. So I'm joined in the studio by Gary Powell. He's a research fellow for sexual orientation and gender identity at the Bow Group. Right, well, thank you very much for joining me. I'm going to start now. What do you think about Halifax, first of all, saying to their members of staff with the gender pronouns?
I was quite alarmed about it all. There was a time when the customer came first, and it was particularly the response on Twitter to people who were objecting to gender ideology or this sign of adherence to gender ideology. The response being that if you don't share our values, then please feel free to close your accounts. And I thought that was a very high-handed and arrogant response from a business. And I believe a lot of people have been closing their accounts. There was something in the newspapers today about where an individual claimed that their family had moved all their savings and investments out of Halifax to the tune of £450,000.
Wow.
And I'm sure a lot of other people are doing the same. But see, this gender ideology or this adherence to gender, it's a religion, by the way. It's not just a political ideology, it's a fundamentalist religion. And if you disagree with any part of it or you express any dissent, then people will try to destroy your life. They will try to cancel you. They will try to destroy your business. They will even try to undermine your family life if they can. And this is really what happens in totalitarian states that impose a religion on people, whether it's a kind of theistic religion or whether it's a political religion like Marxism.
Well, some people would say that that's a bit of an overstretch, really, and that actually it's only he, she, him, her, although in my last count, I think there were 78 new gender pronouns now, some of which appear to be made up. I mean, I didn't agree to all of this, you know.
But too many to remember.
Well, that's the thing. But what would you say to people that say, actually, it's a bit of an overreaction taking your money out of an account just because they're saying that their staff can wear a pronoun on a badge?
Well, on the face of it, it does look like an overreaction. People would be saying, well, why are you worrying about this? And this is because, I mean, I'm immersed in all the detail of gender ideology because it's something I've studied, it's something I write about, I read a lot about it, I talk about it, I've discussed with colleagues and friends. And I'm a gay man. I'm a long-standing gay rights activist. I've been involved in gay rights since 1980. I can see very clearly, gay rights are very, very important to me. There's about 70 countries of the world homosexuality is still criminalised. In about a dozen, you can suffer the death penalty for same-sex activity. Very, very important to me. And I'm seeing the LGBT plus movement, the Pride movement, has actually reversed what we were doing, everything we fought for. Stonewall have even redefined homosexuality as same-gender attraction. Now, homosexuality is same-sex attraction. And when you insist that you have to call it same-gender attraction, that means you have to introduce and accept people of the opposite sex who claim to be transgender into your dating pool. Now, what's going to happen one day when people say, look, I'm sorry, I'm just not attracted to you. It won't only happen because you are the wrong sex. You're not the sex I'm attracted to. That's happening to a lot of lesbians already on lesbian dating sites who are being thrown off the sites for saying that they will not date men with male genitalia who claim that they're women and therefore lesbians. And it's the lesbians who are being thrown off their own sites. So there is now a serious attack on gay and lesbian rights from this transgender ideology, a serious attack on women's rights, men trying to insert themselves into women's protected spaces, a serious attack on child safeguarding, where children are being indoctrinated into transgender ideology. This is drawing in a disproportionate number of gay and lesbian young people and autistic young people and people who are gender non-conforming.
And so do you think that this is almost the opening, like when they would say that cannabis is a gateway drug, this would be sort of like a gateway that opens up this ideology of all the different genders and then makes people sort of susceptible to all the rest of it that comes with it?
Yes, a gateway phenomenon. That's a really good way of framing it. It's a gateway phenomenon. And at the moment, it looks harmless. Yes, somebody wants to present. And also, I also think if people want to present as the opposite gender, I have no objection to that, so long as they respect women's spaces, which transsexual people generally do. Now, there's a very stark difference between transsexual people and transgender people. Transsexuals are people who have suffered from gender dysphoria, and that's it can be a very, very distressing and serious condition. And after a lot of psychotherapy, sometimes the best way to ease their distress is for them to explore presenting themselves socially as a person of the opposite sex. And it's a cultural thing. It's socially determined. And transsexuals tend to explore cross-sex hormones and surgery. But that's very different from transgender people who... Some of the transgender men have got a beard.
So it's confusing, basically. So this whole gender ideology is actually confusing to everybody and actually confusing those who are going through it.
It's confusing.
So in a word then, yes or no, do you think that businesses like Halifax should be getting involved in this debate by putting things on gender pronouns and things like that on the badges?
They're doing enormous social harm, and they're also doing harm to transsexual people. People who are genuinely transsexual, who are suffering from gender dysphoria, because they will also feel under pressure to come out and either lie about what they feel their gender identity is, or to come out before they're ready to do so. So this is the LGBT plus movement doesn't care about transsexuals.
Well,
and this is they are one of the most seriously undermined groups from this ideology.
Well, listen, Gary, it's been an absolute insight talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nana.
for talking to me.
Nice to be here.
That is Gary Powell. He's the Research Fellow for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity at the Bow Group. Right, let's speak to Debbie Hayton. She is a transgender teacher and journalist. Debbie, I want to talk to you about this then. What do you think about the Halifax doing this? A lot of people saying, oh, it's just an innocent thing. Why would anyone take their account? That's fine. Seriously. Halifax being very firm in their movement with this, saying, well, if you don't like it, you can leave. What do you think about all of this?
Well, yeah, I think Gary said quite a lot of what I would say, actually. First of all, you say, why does it matter? Why do these things matter? Well, it matters because the option to display pronouns can very quickly become an expectation to display pronouns, an expectation to do this if you want to be seen to be a good person. Good people will do this. We're not really sure why pronouns need to be displayed, because for heaven's sake, human beings can tell the sex of other human beings, and we've always been able to do that. But going back to the expectation on that, I will speak as a transsexual here, that for the first 42 years of my life, if this had happened, if there was an expectation on me to share my pronouns, I've got two choices. I either share the pronouns which are exacerbating my dysphoria, or I come out there and then, at work, in a business meeting, or wherever. It's imposing, making imposition on people that's not necessary, and we shouldn't be doing it.
Because surely, instead of just having this pronoun, you could just have your name on the badge, right? I mean, that gets rid of any sort of confusion. You can be called by your name. See, and I think that, as you said, when you start putting these pronouns in there, then there's almost a pressure for the person who's not using a pronoun now to have a pronoun or find a pronoun. And actually, looking at the gender pronouns, there are about 78 of them now. I mean, there's ers, vers, ters, ers, ze, her, ex, I'm sorry, but these have just been made up. I mean, I'm concerned. What if you don't fit into one of the 78? Can you make up your own? I mean, Halifax would say that they're trying to strive for inclusion and equality, and quite simply, they're doing what's right. What do you think?
But in a situation like that, when somebody's wearing a badge, it's when you're in a face-to-face meeting with somebody, and you don't use he and she then, you use you. You know, when I'm talking to you, Nana, I call you you. And when I'm talking about me, I use I and me. We don't use these third-person pronouns in that situation at all, so it's just totally unnecessary.
It is true, and but they would say they care about their customers, and they're doing this, and they've actually said to people if they don't like it, they can leave. I mean, briefly, your view.
Well, if that's what they think, they're going to lose some customers here, and probably more customers than they're expecting. They've bought into an ideology that this makes people this is the thing that good people do, which is displaying pronouns, and the proof of the pudding will be what happens to their bottom line.
Well, listen, Debbie, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing your view. That's Debbie Hayton. She's a transgender teacher and a journalist. So let's see what you've been saying quickly. Deb says, I can be polite to individuals without knowing their pronouns. It's as important as me needing to know their favourite meal or how they drink their coffee. Jay says, people should do whatever they want, just don't force me to live by your rules. Trev says, I wish business, football, tennis, pubs, clubs, police, fast services, the NHS, etc. would just do their jobs and leave the political ideology to the political ideologies or ideologues. Thank you for that. Keep them coming. Listen, if you've just tuned in, where have you been? You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, we'll continue with our Great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, should business delve into the gender debate? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster Narendra Kaur, and also leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Hello, it's just gone 5:30. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Some breaking news this hour, that is that the Conservative whip has been suspended from Chris Pincher while the MP is being investigated. A formal complaint was made to Parliament's watchdog after he was accused of groping two men at a private members' club while drunk on Wednesday. He resigned last night, saying he'd embarrassed himself and other people after drinking too much. Sex offender Luis da Silva Neto has been found guilty of spiking two men with drugs before raping one and sexually assaulting the other. He drugged the men with GHB, a so-called aphrodisiac drug, in separate incidents last November and December in Middle Barton in Oxfordshire. Da Silva Neto from London will be sentenced next Thursday. GB News understands UK authorities have plans in place for the possible return of a convicted jihadist and alleged member of the so-called Islamic State group. According to reports, Turkish officials say Ain Davis from West London could be deported within weeks. He was jailed in 2017 for terrorism offences and was a member of the execution squad known as the Beatles. Police have warned that lives could be put at risk if protests go ahead at the British Formula One Grand Prix this weekend. Northamptonshire Police say they've received credible intelligence that a group is planning to invade the track on race day. A record crowd of 142,000 are expected at Silverstone on Sunday. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the...
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon, welcome aboard. This is GB News, I'm Nana Akua. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 38 minutes after 5 o'clock, and now it is back to our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should business delve into the gender debate? Now, Halifax has been accused of alienating its customers after its social media posts on gender pronouns. The bank recently announced that it would be allowing employees to present their preferred gender pronoun on name badges. And it told critical customers that if they didn't like it, they could simply close their accounts. So is it a step too far? And should businesses just stay out of this kind of debate altogether? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by UKIP leader Neil Hamilton, and also broadcaster Narinder Kaur. Now I'm going to start with you, Narinder, because you put out a tweet today, earlier, and this is what it said. Good God, are folk really leaving Halifax just because of a name badge that says that they or him or whatever? How pathetic. Reminds me when they wouldn't get served by someone of colour back in the day. Same old idiots.
Oh my God, it's a badge. And it just says a pronoun. You can choose whatever you want. You don't have to choose anything. And wow, 150 customers left. I take my hat off to Halifax, and I'm a customer of theirs, and I will stay with them, and I think they've done a great job. And this question about should businesses get involved? Well, of course they should, because we're a community. They're part of the world, and we go there, and you know, they deal with our finances, and they're not doing a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's also, I can't believe you said critical people. I'd say people who are really, have they got nothing else better to do? Well, it's just a pronoun. Why is such a fuss?
I find it interesting that you also compare it with people of colour, because I just think that is a very, very, very difficult comparison. I mean, there's a load.
I don't think it's difficult. I remember when someone wouldn't get served by that.
So when I'm talking about that, that is so, for me as a person of colour, reading that, I'm thinking, what a pronoun? That's so different. This is a different extreme completely. No, but I get bored of hearing comparisons of people.
Have left.
How can you compare that to racism?
Because back in the day, they wouldn't get served by someone of colour. And now they're saying, well, we're going to leave the bank because she, he, they, and this is too much for me.
But do you take what Gary said, Alan said, that actually, Gary said this, sorry, that it's the beginning and there's a tip of a sort of iceberg, like a gateway.
Would have just been normal. Just to normalise more inclusivity. What's wrong with being inclusive?
Neil.
Well, call me old-fashioned, but I think the business of business is business, not politics. And they should concentrate on making profits for their shareholders and run a successful business in the interest of its customers and of the people who work for them. What we've got here is a few millennial snowflakes in charge of their social media accounts who want to impose their woke ideology on the rest of us. So we've got an infinitesimally small minority that wants to impose its view of the world on the majority. It'd be interesting to know what the views of shareholders in Halifax or of the customers of Halifax. But they're not interested in the customers because the customers can sling their hook if they don't agree with it.
Yes, and I agree with Halifax saying that because we're an inclusive society, Neil.
Well, it's not very inclusive to tell people to clear off.
A minority, majority it is, because they're saying, look, and you're saying these woke millennials, they will become they're the future generation.
God help us.
We have to include people.
God help us.
What is wrong? Why is everyone so fenced in with what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed?
Okay, well, let me put this to you then, because when I read some of these pronouns, I heard you laughing. All right, so out of the 78 gender pronouns, let me read you some of these, because if somebody told me to call them that, I'd look and say it doesn't even make sense. On the screen there, and if you're listening on radio, I'll read some out. Herself, herself, which is obviously one, their self, theirs, the self, whose self is his, gers, viz, the, xi, I don't even know if it's X and E, that's a word, is it? Exem is a
Are they really all these pronouns?
That's 78. Well, exactly. This is
does it matter?
No, it does, because
why are you so bothered?
Listen, I went to a restaurant a little while ago, and I was talking to somebody. I said, "Oh yeah, he served me over there," and he went, "Excuse me, but it's they." And I went, "Well, are there two of you?" It doesn't even make.
No, well, I would just say I'm sorry. I just say I'm sorry. They.
But it doesn't make.
I want to learn. Why not learn?
But it doesn't make grammatic sense. You're asking me to break grammar to go along with something that doesn't make sense. I'm now meant to call you plural when you are they, when you're one person, which is not they. Why should I do that?
Because they don't identify with he or she. It's
well, that's not my.
It's not that complicated.
But it doesn't make sense.
It will make sense.
No,
we should educate ourselves to include more people.
Well, can you call me Queen then? Because I've decided
yes.
that I'm now
I'm
Queen.
Nana. You can
HRH Nana, please. I mean, it's nonsense. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, what we're seeing here is really the abolition of sex, isn't it? And why aren't we all it? And that would solve the problem.
Well, there is one that is it, actually, which I thought was an insult, actually.
Yeah, but I'll go back to the point I made a moment ago. You know, this debate actually personally affects an infinitesimally small minority, and it's the cheerleaders for that infinitesimally politically motivated minority who want to impose their views on the rest of the world.
And it's always minorities need help. They need support, and they should be getting backed up.
I'm a minority. I need support.
You're not.
I'm a minority. I need support.
Yes,
so are you. You should see the vile abuse that's heaped on me on Twitter.
I mean, look.
But you're the leader of UKIP party, was essentially racist, so you would get abused.
No, it's certainly not racist.
That's not fair.
I'd say it is.
That's not fair. Well, I'll give you a chance to respond to that.
I think it's a great mistake when people come on television to demonstrate their own ignorance. And that, I'm afraid to say, is what you've just done.
Sorry, let him reply. Let him respond to you.
We're not a racist party. In fact, we have people of all races who are in UKIP or have been in UKIP over the years. We believe in Britain as a sovereign independent nation. That's why UKIP is in existence at all. It's nothing to do with racism.
I'd say it is underlyingly.
No, but he's just told you what it is. Yeah. He's just told you what it is.
But I'd say underlyingly it is.
Well,
I understand
that's your opinion.
That's
your opinion.
No, I'd say there's...
I personally, I'm going with Neil on this. I know there's a lot of people that everybody puts the label racist on something to make it an easier...
Oh, UKIP definitely is. I mean, goodness.
Well, listen...
Just because you say it is doesn't make it.
Your Twitter timeline is... I went down it and I'd say there's... I would read that as a woman of colour and say there's racism.
But I read it as a woman of colour and I don't see that. So there's a different view here. So to be fair, I think that the people who believe in the sovereignty of the United Kingdom, and I don't equate that necessarily with racism. But there are racist people, and I don't think you can say that that whole party is racist because some racist people affiliate themselves.
I'd say their directors do come down. There is a lot.
I think there's an extreme left wing as well who would pretend to be non-racist who actually are the racists. I think there's an extreme on both sides as well.
Yeah,
I don't think it's
like
fair.
The anti-Semitism that was in the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn.
Some people would say that as well. So let's get back to our gender pronouns, though, because actually what Gary touched on was something that's quite important, really, that it does appear to be a gateway of a forcing of us all to go along with a narrative that I haven't agreed to it. I don't see why I should go along with it. And then Halifax saying to their customers, well, if you don't like it, just do one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
For them, I take my hat off. No one's forcing you. Why do you feel so forced? There's no force. It's just about learning.
It is
I think there's a lot of hate towards this. Why not have a little more acceptance towards how they want to be described? It's just, like you said, it's a small minority. Why are you so insecure about a small minority?
Well, because these days there's a kind of groupthink which imposes its ideology upon the majority And people feel inhibited. People feel inhibited expressing their own opinions, which are contrary to that.
I don't think they
view.
feel inhibited. I think it's freedom of speech.
Well,
Everyone seems to have
I'm
an
afraid
opinion.
you're out of touch with the reality
No,
of
I
what's
think you
going
are,
on
Neil.
in business in this country,
No.
where people can lose their jobs, have their careers destroyed.
Exactly.
And I
As
know
Gary
some
said,
of them.
they should lose
I
their
know
jobs
some
if
of
they're
them,
being hateful.
because
not
they've
being
said
hateful.
the wrong
They just
thing.
disagree. They disagree.
No, they shouldn't lose
But
their
Gary
jobs if
made,
they disagree.
Yeah, but you see, but that's the point that Gary made. That with these sort of ideologies, if you don't go along with it, then you could find yourself in a position where you lose your job. And look at people like Kathleen Stott, who dared to talk about women.
Exactly.
You know, look what happened to her. She had to leave her post as a lecturer, a very valuable member of staff, because they dared to mention something that ventured into the trans debate. Rosie Duffield was afraid to go to one of her conferences at the Labour Party because she dared to comment on women having a cervix. I mean, this is where we're going with it, and that is the worry.
But I think that's educational, and I think they should be called up, and people should be made to be accountable. How can we go in the world where there's so much
Accountable
differences?
for what?
Accountable for what?
No, but then they're offending
She said women have a cervix.
No, but
what's wrong with that? Why? See, this is what we're talking
There's
about.
a lot of context around that.
Yeah, but what's
though.
wrong with
It's not
that?
just
No.
There's nothing wrong with just that in
J.K.
theory.
Rowling said women menstruate. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Because she was in the
But she's
context
right.
of it all. She was being hateful towards.
She
trans
wasn't.
people.
No, she wasn't. She even said that she has not. She welcomes all people and has nothing against them. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about a narrative that actually breeds this weird sort of energy that brings on this whole. How dare you?
Insecure about it.
They're not insecure.
I feel there is an insecurity.
They're
Let people be.
But that's exactly right. They should let people be, but these people won't let you be, and that's the problem.
No, they're just fighting their corner. They're not letting you be. They're fighting the corner.
What we're doing is fighting intolerance, actually. When the gay rights movement started, it was a plea for tolerance. Now, Stonewall have put that entirely on its head, and what they're trying to do is impose their views upon everybody else and to stop other people expressing their opinions. So that's intolerance. Now, Stonewall's become an intolerant organisation, not a tolerant organisation.
Well, listen, this show is nothing without you and your views, so let's welcome our great British voice, their opportunity to be on the show. Tell us what they really think about the topics that we're discussing. Deborah Ridley, where should we go to, Deborah? Should we go to Dorset?
Yeah, great.
Dorset's a lovely, lovely place. Let's have a chat with Deborah in Dorset. Deborah, the two Ds. Debbie, is it OK to call you Debbie? Debbie, what do you think today? Yeah. We've been talking about this debate. Should businesses be involved in this? What's your view on it?
OK. Afternoon, Nana. Thank you for inviting me on the show. I actually think that I want to, as a customer, to go into a bank, I just want to be served by whoever it might be that serves me. So I think it's very difficult, isn't it, for people just to be walk into a bank and just to be served. And I think I really agree with Neil and Gary in terms of what they've said, because it's about businesses. It shouldn't be about anybody's gender. When I go into a bank, I'm not really interested in anyone's gender. OK, we have a choice to have, to be identified whatever we want. But I think as a business, I think it's really going down the wrong road.
Interesting, Deborah. So a badge with a gender pronoun and Halifax saying to their staff, well, if you don't like it, you can clear off. Do you think that that's acceptable?
No, definitely not. No. I think, obviously, I think customers sometimes taken a step too far. I think, obviously, if it was my bank, I probably wouldn't take my money out of the bank. But I just think, it's just silly. It is getting ridiculous, all of this gender, and I think you touched on it. I think it is quite divisive.
Ridley, thank you so much. She's the first time as a great British voice, and she's been fabulous. Lovely to talk to you in Dorset.
Thank you.
Right, so today I'm asking, should businesses delve into gender debate? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts. Milo says, I think Halifax is a brilliant bank and I'm surprised by its action. They probably think they're doing the right thing. They're not. But I won't hold it against them. It's like a lot of people who did the Black Square for Black Lives Matter. That turned out to be a scam. But I said that from the start, and I had a load of people who are white telling me, how could you do that? And I said, well, because that's what I think. I said it was a far-left Marxist extreme pressure group, and that's what it turned out to be, of course. Jim says, if I banked with Halifax, I'd close my account. Also, if I did bank with them and I saw someone called Gemma, who was a woman, yet declared herself as he, him, I would still address her as Miss. It's nonsense. There are two genders. genders, male and female. Everything else is fairy tales. Louise says, Halifax are bang out of order. I'll be looking to move my mortgage ASAP.
It'll cost you.
Well, if you can get a better rate, good luck with that. But now it is time for our Quickfire debates, the part of the show where we discuss some of the other stories making the headlines. And joining me today is broadcaster Narinder Kaur. Narinder, thank you for joining us. The first timer here on my panel. And also broadcaster Neil and leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton. Right, on to our first story. A brave mother risked her life diving into a fast-flowing river to save her son's favourite toy rabbit. Lou Austin, who's from Dorset, waded up to the 200-foot in water that came up to her neck to save her 2-year-old son Tommy's bun. Have you ever risked your life to save an inanimate object? I'm going to start with you, Neil.
Well, I can't recall ever having done that, but I've done my best to protect Christine throughout my life.
Oh,
she's very animated.
She's beautiful, isn't she?
Oh, I need a husband like Neil.
You've got one.
Not like Neil.
He's not like Neil. All right, well, you said he was in UKIP, which makes it what you said. Well, I won't repeat it. I don't believe you are, Neil.
I'll still marry him.
OK, so what do you think? Have you ever...
No, and I wouldn't. How ridiculous. Spoiling the child. That's it, look, it's gone. It's drowned. Like, I'm talking of woke and accepting. No, you do not do that. She put her life at risk for a teddy bear. Stop.
That's a bit stupid.
Behave. That's more stupid than the he, she, did.
Actually, yeah, I agree with that. It is stupid. What's she doing that for? That's ridiculous. I mean, the child would be, if the child loses the mother, that's the worst thing that could happen.
Oh, the water would have been freezing.
Odd priority.
Well, right, let's move on. A century-old vampire hunting kit was sold for 5 times its guide price at auction. The kit was owned by Lord Hailey, and it comes adorned with crucifixes, pistols and holy water bottles, and went for £13,000. So do you think Lord Hailey ever got to use the vampire hunting kit? What do you think?
I don't know what to say about that. I've really lost my words. Does it matter if he used it?
Who put that one in?
Yeah,
that's rubbish.
Does it matter?
Probably end up being used on some dubious website, I guess.
For some dubious purposes. Right, well, let's move on to this one then. What about this? 2 Just Stop Oil protesters have glued themselves to Van Gogh, a painting at the Courtyard Gallery in London. A statement shared by the group said that galleries should close directors of art institutions. They should be calling on the government to stop all new oil and gas projects immediately. I know that some of the galleries actually were sponsored by some oil companies, weren't they? So what do you think? Just Stop Oil gluing themselves to stuff like this. This time a picture.
Well, I should just leave them permanently glued there. And
I love they've glued themselves. Do they actually literally? How do they get off it? I'm so intrigued by the gluing.
Well, if they're stupid,
they can then become exhibits at the Courtyard Gallery. So they've got immortality.
Well, if they glued themselves to the actual picture itself or the frame, but it was the picture itself.
Well, it's criminal damage, of course, and they should be prosecuted. And
I think good for them doing what they believe in.
Well, that's a recipe for anarchy.
It's a
recipe for anarchy.
Well, yes, but it's got them the coverage they wanted.
So what do you think?
That's not a justification for it.
Well, let's quickly look at our final story. Vladimir Putin said yesterday that topless Western leaders would be disgusting. It's after Boris Johnson joked that G7 leaders could take their clothes off to show that they were tougher than Putin.
Well, I'm with Putin on that one.
So, I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
I think Putin would look better, though. I think he is the hotter out of the 3.
I think he's horrible. I think he's just horrible.
Well, we're just talking about the body, though.
No, even that.
Boris, you'd prefer Boris?
Neither of them. Listen,
no, exactly.
Biden. I think it's ghastly, all of it ghastly. No, Vladimir Putin, no, I don't think so.
Would you draw the line at me, though, Nana?
Oh, Neil, you love me.
Neil, get your toes now.
He's like a cuddly bear. You can't say that. Right, listen, up next, it's Jubes and Co with Michelle Dewberry, who's here in the studio. Michelle, what have you got lined up for us?
Nana, I was just chuckling away then at that protester gluing story. I don't know if you saw what they did in France the other day to some of those protesters that glued themselves to the road. The French police had none of it. They just yanked them off the floor and pushed them out of the way. I said we should have that approach. That'd soon sort people out, wouldn't it? Anyway, coming up on my show, another day, Boris Johnson. I mean, he must put his head in his hands, Nana, because another day, another sleaze allegation against another MP suspended, Chris Pincher. You couldn't make that name up in this context, could you? We'll be looking at what is going on. Also, I wonder, are we tiptoeing towards more COVID restrictions over in Scotland? They've extended some COVID powers that were supposed to be for emergencies only. Here, you've got Boris Johnson. He weren't explicitly ruling out another lockdown. I really hope not. And also, a Tory MP worrying that the floodgates have been open when it comes to materials that are going into schools for sex education. Why are we so desperate to overly sexualise children? And lastly, Nana, when should people be allowed to come back to the UK? For example, there's been a guy, you remember the ISIS terror group, the Beatles? Well, one of those guys is coming back imminently from Turkey. I say no thank you, but the law says otherwise, so we'll be looking at that as well.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't come back here. Michelle, thank you so much. Looking forward to that. Well, listen, on today's show, we've been asking, is Brexit here to stay? According to our Twitter poll, it hasn't changed. 92% of you say yes, 8% of you say no. I've got to say thank you so much to my superstar panel, UKIP leader, Neil Hamilton. Neil, thank you very much for joining me. Can we get a shot of Neil, please? Don't mind. Neil Hamilton, thank you very much. And also, he's coming in. And also, Narinda Kaur, thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having us.
It's been a pleasure. And as ever, thank you to you at home for joining me. It's been a pleasure. I will be back tomorrow at 4 to discuss more stories. Joining me will be Leo Kearse, Calvin Robinson and Matthew Stadland. It's gonna be fiery. But now, I'll leave you with the weather. Tubes & Co is next.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. More showers to come this weekend, but if you're after something drier, brighter and warmer, next week looks reasonably promising, certainly across the southern half of the UK. For fine weather, we need high pressure to be sitting over us, but this low pressure is taking control through the weekend. It's not going to rain all weekend. Most of us will see some sunny spells, but as this weather system moves in, bringing some fairly heavy rain this evening across Northern Ireland, spreading into parts of southern and western Scotland. Ahead of that, across the east right now, some lively showers, but they do get pushed out into the North Sea as that weather front brings rain into Wales and western parts of England by dawn. Much of eastern England having a dry night once this evening's showers clear away and temperatures holding up in double digits. On to Saturday's weather, it's a bit of a mess. We start with a line of rain across Yorkshire, down through the Midlands, South East Wales and South West England. That slowly trickles eastwards. Doesn't really reach East Anglia in the South East till late in the day, so mostly dry and bright here. Behind it, some sunny spells, but there will again be showers, staying fairly cloudy.